Hi, welcome. Today's presentation is on Financial Aid 101. We're going to look at all of the areas of financial aid for college. Many parents ask, how can they possibly afford college? Should we even send our kids? It's insane. It's just, the costs are just spiraling. And they're right in some senses. The sticker price cost is spiraling, but that's not what you pay. So let's take a look at figuring out what you pay, where aid can come from, all of the basics. We're going to talk about financial aid and the sources of aid, what the EFC is. You'll hear that term bandied about. What does it mean? How do they calculate it? The role of the FAFSA form, which is all these acronyms. I know that's the free application for federal student aid. We'll take a look at what that's for. We're also going to talk about scholarships, and there are types of them. And college selection actually plays a huge piece in this entire process. We're also going to talk about the cost of college, and I have a free gift for you at the very end. So we're going to get into all of that. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Katherine O'Brien. I am the founder of Celtic College Consultants. And since 2004, I have been working with high school students and their families across the country, helping them figure out what to study, why to go to college, what their goals are, where to go, how to pay for it, getting through the whole process of preparing and applying, both for admissions and for aid, and getting scholarships and putting the whole thing together so that it actually works for the family. I've written several books. The Ultimate Guide to Top Quality College Planning is available through Amazon. And in that book, I explain the different kinds of college consultants there are, the different kinds of training. There's some that are really out to sell you financial products. And then there's some that just do admissions and that side, and some that just do the financial side, and a few like me that do both sides of the student formation and admissions and all of that piece, as well as the financial planning and financial aid sides. I've spoken at many conferences, both to my peers as well as to families across the country, various places. I'm a certified college planning specialist. So in addition to doing this since 2004, I also have training, and I have annual continuing education requirements to make sure that I stay on top of all of the changes, because Congress is involved, therefore everything changes. Colleges are involved, therefore everything's constantly changing. And then just to give an idea, my classes of 2015 to 2018 have averaged almost $250,000 each in scholarship offers. So that's a piece that significantly can lower the cost to the family and open up different opportunities, different campuses. So we'll explore all that when we get to that part of it. One caveat at the beginning, no one can give you a golden ticket. It's just not something that exists, or free. Even a full ride is still going to cost something. So often I have some families that come with stars in their eyes, kind of just hoping beyond hope that somehow there is a golden ticket. Somehow they can just make all the dollar signs go away. And that's just not reality. So let's take a look at what is reality. The average debt these days is $37,000 for undergraduates. That's appalling. It should be appalling. It's ridiculous, but it also can be avoided. And there are many students who avoid it, who never have any debt, and they just don't. And there's a number of things that you can do to lower your costs and to avoid that whole circumstance coming up. So we will talk about some of that as well. Colleges are businesses, and when I was early doing this work, that was something that I really had to change my way of thinking about. And so I really emphasized to families that colleges are businesses and students and families are their customers. And we really need to remember that, because so often we get into the mindset of, oh, I got to do all these things and hope that I'll get in, like we're kind of subservient or groveling or something. And there is an aspect, of course, there's applications and and we don't know that we're going to get accepted and all of that, but they are also fishing for customers. So we need to remember that this, at the end of the day, is a transaction. We're purchasing a service. They want to get the highest price out of us, and we want to get the best we can with the lowest cost to ourselves. Financial aid, when you boil it down, really is coupons. And I have seen colleges use small scholarships to wealthy families that simply don't need any financial aid, just to tip their hand to maybe pick that school. Because after all, they get bragging rights. And, my daughter got a scholarship to whatever school. And that does make a difference. So we'll get into all of the pieces of that. And what do the colleges want? They want bragging rights. They can say that they had kids from every state, or, they do a lot of first generation students or minority students or men or women or people from, whatever place. They want that. People with whichever accomplishments we've had, all of the last Intel Science Fair winners, et cetera, et cetera. They want to be able to have those bragging rights and put them on their websites and make their school sound better. They also want our money. We're looking for a great education for our child to go become the best that they can be as a person and as somebody equipped to go work in our world. Does that mean it's job training? Not for most cases. Engineering, maybe, but really know how to think, how to read, how to communicate, how to function, and have an expertise in some area as well. And we don't want to break the bank to do it. So remember that colleges are businesses. It's not all in their favor. A lot of it is, unfortunately, but let's break it open. So let's start with the nitty-gritty of what does it cost to go to school for 1 year? There's a term called cost of attendance, or COA, that you will see bandied around on their websites and financial aid forums and things. And what is that is often the question that people just aren't sure what that means. So it means tuition, books, room and board, and then the colleges kind of make up a number or use an average or somehow come up with a number for travel costs, insurance, fees, and expenses, school supplies and phones and things. And they have an official cost of attendance. Now, at a big university, it can vary that the official cost of attendance, maybe in the College of Business, differs from the one in the College of Engineering. But there is an official cost of attendance, and that is the number that will be used as the cost to go to that school for a single year. There are a few schools that will guarantee the cost of attendance for your child will not increase while they're there. There are most schools that doesn't work that way. It goes up a little bit every year. But there is an official number. That said, if I live in Alaska and I'm going to a school in Florida, my travel costs are significantly higher than somebody who lives in Georgia going to that school in Florida. So they do have some ability to make adjustments, and you need to know that, because that may come into your negotiating down the line. Okay, where do we get money from? So there's a lot of money out there, and it's important that we understand where it's coming from. So we're going to start in that top right white area, federal grant programs other than Pell. So we've got supplemental education opportunity grants and SMART grants and all kinds of other federal grants. So that's 7% of the financial aid comes from that. 19% comes from Pell grants, which are for lower income families, but they cap out at like $6,000, not even. So there's a lot of money there, but there isn't a lot of money there. As a proportion of your cost for school, it's not like it used to be. Way back when they started the Pell grants, you could go to school on a Pell grant. No longer, but it does contribute, and it makes a big difference for a lot of families. Federal work study is less than 1% of the pie, but if you get it, take it. You do better academically when you're working, and the income that you earn as part of a work study program does not count toward your financial aid considerations for the next school year, as opposed to private employment. So if you can get that, great. Federal loans is a huge piece, and this is actually slightly outdated, because they've taken the loans off because that's overwhelming, the amount of loans. Then we have federal education tax credits and deductions. So pay attention. I know they've changed the 1040 now, but you still can take off for tuition, and there are tax credits. There's several different programs. There are some deductions. So you need to see what makes the most sense. But that's 9% of financial aid. So there's a significant benefit there to cash in your pocket that you can use for school. Most states have a grant program for college. And so that's another 5% of the pie. And then we have institutional grants, which is a big 18% piece of the pie. And this is the piece that seems to be invisible. Most people have no idea it's there. They don't think about it. They don't expect it. They don't go looking for it. And that's a big mistake. So we will talk about that at length later in this program for sure. And then private and employer grants. I think people have heard of this. So some employers, Qualcomm and others, will reimburse their employees for continuing on. Typically, these are people who are working and earning master's degrees, but sometimes it is your Starbucks barista who's participating in their program and working his or her way through undergrad. And then private grants or scholarships, your Walmart scholarship, your Nordstrom scholarship, your Coca-Colas, all of those. So that's 4% of the pie. And they put them together because private scholarships is about 1.5% of the whole pie. But that's what people think of first. So we're going to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly about that. Money is good, but some money is better. So that's the various places where you can get financial aid. Whoops. To break it up a little bit, so we've got need-based aid, Pell Grants, Stafford student loans, sort of. Work study is need-based. Other federal grants are need-based. State and college grants tend to be need-based. I said sort of on the student loans because any citizen or green card holder can take a student loan through the federal student loan programs. You don't have to have financial need, but you do need to file the FAFSA. So that's why it's on the need side. And then you have merit-based aid, scholarships, tuition reduction programs, institutional grants. So we will get into all of this, but you need to recognize that there are more than one categories of monies that we will get that will help us. And as you see, most of this is not money you got to pay back, just the loans. There's also private loans, which are not need-based, not really aid, it's private loans. Okay. So let's talk about need-based financial aid first. You need to apply to get this. So there's always the question is, should I bother filing the FAFSA? We're not going to get anything anyway. You'd be surprised, but most states use the FAFSA as their gateway. It's also the gateway to all the federal monies, including the loans and work study. And it's also the gateway most colleges use for their own money. There are a number of colleges that will not give out even scholarship money if you don't file a FAFSA. Because if you don't file it, they're saying, well, I guess you're ready to write a check. So if you're ready to write a check, we're not going to send you any pennies because we're going to use those on other people that have raised their hands saying, yeah, we'd love to have some help. There are other schools that don't require the FAFSA to get scholarships or tuition reductions or things from them, but they don't typically let you know which is which. So it's always one of those questions that's out there in the professional networks. Everybody's scrabbling around going, okay, so did you get money from XYZ school? This student did and this student didn't, but they didn't file the FAFSA, so does that make a difference? And trying to gather that data, and it changes. So it's best to just apply. It's a very simple process at this point. The tricky part is doing the financial planning ahead of time so your numbers are most advantageous they can be. So let me explain. There's a couple things about it that are a little bit confusing, even though they've simplified the online process significantly. First, the website you'll need is fafsa.ed.gov because it's part of the Department of Education. So that's where the .ed comes from. And you're going to use what are called prior tax returns. So it's a little bit hard to explain, but basically the fall term of the school year that you're looking at. So say the 2021 school year, subtract 2 years from that. So that would be 2020 minus 2 is 2018. That's the tax return year. that you're going to use for your income. You're going to use your current, as of the day you're filing, information for your assets. So that can be a little bit confusing. The form will guide you through it. They changed this just a few years ago because they created something called the Data Retrieval Tool, the DRT. And the federal government actually started talking to each other. And so the Department of Education and the IRS created this tool so that you could go from your FAFSA into the database in the IRS and pull your tax information out of that database into your FAFSA. The schools like that. They know that those are the correct numbers. There aren't any typos or anything like that because you're pulling it right from the IRS database. Okay, and obviously you can't get in there and go do other things. But you can pull your own data. And actually for further security, they actually made it so that all you can see are asterisks, even in your own FAFSA. So that's a little challenging in some ways, but in any event, what that means, though, is that the IRS needs to have your tax return processed in order to pull that data. So the FAFSA opens in October, and so you're going to file it in October of senior year for the student's freshman year, and then every year after that, sometime between October and March, typically is when the colleges want you to file it again for the subsequent college years. So say you have a student graduating in 2020, you're going to October of 29, their fall semester, that FAFSA will open and you can submit it. You're going to go in there, you're going to pull your 2018 tax information, which is already processed and ready to go because you filed in April. This is 6 months later. It should be all set. Now, if you're an October filer or somebody who tends to file extensions, the college years are not the years to do that. You want to get your taxes in earlier. You'll need to contact the financial aid offices if you are a late filer or if you're dealing with a corporation that's not on a calendar year, fiscal year, those sorts of things, and see how they would like you to handle it. Because they need the correct data, but when the calendar years are different, everybody's got their own procedures about how to do that. So hopefully that makes sense. So that senior in October of 19 is going to use their 2018 tax information, and they're going to use their current information with regard to their marital status, their family size, and their assets. And that's going to happen both for the parent and for the student. So if the student didn't work in 2018, they're going to be a non-filer, but they might have, 80 grand in the bank because somebody died and gave them a lot of money, or they have a business or some other reason, or they may have nothing. But all those bits of information. So let's take a look at what they're looking at. So the methodology, the mathematical formula, and the number of tables is about 36 pages long. When you boil it down, you end up with 4 basic numbers. So the parent's adjusted gross income, and they're going to look at 22 to 47% of it. Now, there are some deductions. They take out a little bit for living, and they take out for state taxes and different things, but roughly somewhere between a quarter and half of your adjusted gross income. And then your assets. There is an asset allowance. Depending on the age of the older parent, there's a table for it, and it's about $750 times the age of the parent, roughly. And so if you've got $100,000 in assets and a $50,000 asset allowance, then they're only going to assess $50,000 of your assets at 5.65%. So they will add that in. And then they'll do the same thing with a student. Half of their income, 20% of their assets. They don't have an asset allowance. And put all that together and you end up with your EFC. Now, how much aid do we qualify for is the next question. So remember, we talked about cost of attendance a couple minutes ago. We're going to subtract from that your EFC, your family contribution, and your resources. And that's going to give us your need. Now, what are resources? Resources are outside sources of funds. What does that mean? That's if grandma's going to write a check, that's private scholarship money. Those kinds of things are resources. And they, as you can see, dollar for dollar, decrease your need. So if you got $10,000 in your local scholarship that has to be reported by law to the colleges, and that decreases your needs by $10,000, which is great, but not everybody meets full need. So some schools will still gap you. Some will use that $10,000 to fill the gap. So it depends on how they handle it, which a lot of times depends on what their numbers are looking like as far as getting their enrollment to the level that they need and their budgets to the levels that they need. Not things that you can control. You can certainly ask that they put it towards the gap, but everybody's going to have a different policy. And school 1 to school 2 are going to be different. And school 1 this year versus school 1 next year could be very different. Staff can change, administrations can change, priorities of the school can change, their own numbers and change. There's lots going on that has nothing to do with you personally, but will impact your financial aid. So it helps to understand your numbers and where they're coming from, but recognize the milieu in which we're working. Okay, so I wanted to bring a little bit more reality into what does this actually mean. So here's an example. I went to Northwestern undergrad, and University of Illinois downstate is the rival school, big public state university. And for a state university, they do really well with their aid. But their cost of attendance is just under 30. And so for a family with an EFC of $5,000, the need is 25 basically. And their percent need met is very good for a state university at 66%. They're often less than that, but they're 66. And their split is good. So their gift aid is 2/3 free money, and then 1/3 self-help, which is work study and loans. So when I'm working with a family, I always consider all self-help loans, because if it ends up being work study, we're to the good. And if it ends up still being loans, we're expecting that. So the out-of-pocket cost is just over 13. Now, if you add in the loans, you're at 18.5, okay? And then we've got Bad Boy Northwestern. It's super expensive, more than twice as much. Yes, these numbers are a couple of years old, but the principle remains. Same family, EFC is 5, so you need 58 grand. So a lot of families stop right there and say, we can't afford it. There's no way. But if you get in, there's a way. So they're 100% need met school, and there are several dozen of these in the country. And their mix is great, 85% gift aid and 15% self-help. So what does that mean? It means that you're probably getting work study and taking a student loan, but your out-of-pocket is 5. If you add back in, assuming it's all loans, which it probably isn't, but assuming it is, you're at 13.7. Northwestern out-of-pocket stays cheaper until your family contribution is more than the cost of attendance at University of Illinois. So that percent need met piece that I just mentioned that a lot of people scratch their head over, that's where that comes into play. And then also the mix between gift aid and self-help. So as you're researching schools and looking up data, that percent of need met piece is important, because if they don't meet your need, well, as you saw in Illinois, because your out-of-pocket cost is, where am I at? It includes your unmet need as well. So you've got cost of attendance minus financial aid. So your unmet need is there. Plus, so your need is, so your EFC is 5. You've got 8,300 that's not being covered in financial aid. And then you're having to add in the loans and stuff on top of it, the 10 grand, which is where you're getting that 18.7. So that's where that comes from. Because unmet need is money you still have to pay. Okay. Hopefully that clarified things. Okay, let's take a look over at scholarships and how they work. 93% of all scholarship monies come from the colleges and universities themselves. Back on that chart, let me scoot back there real quick. Sorry to this one. Institutional grants that I didn't really define, that big 18%, that's scholarships from the colleges themselves. Okay. So that piece is huge. And of all the scholarship money, 93% is coming from the colleges. 7% is coming from private sources. Okay. That's a lot of money. And the average scholarships at private colleges is almost 16 grand, and it's about 6 at publics. Okay. So there is more help where you need it more, because private colleges tend to cost more. a lot of these, or not a lot of these, but about 10% of the colleges will require the CSS Profile form in addition to the FAFSA in order to access their institutional aid. Now, institutional aid, by definition, belongs to the institution, the college. So they can set up whatever rules that they want about how they're going to give it out. They can require additional forms. Some have their own forms. Some use the profile. Some just use the FAFSA. It is up to that school how they want to do that. The FAFSA, only by law, regulates how federal monies are used. Many states also tend to use that data. It's there. It's easy. They tend to just use that, but they don't have to. The colleges certainly are not required to use that for their own money. So you will find a school, especially the schools with deep pockets, will require the profile as well. It is far more detailed. I use the analogy that the FAFSA is getting your teeth cleaned, because we all know what that is, but the profile is like getting a root canal. It's a much deeper dive, and they're going to look at 3 years worth of data. They want, like in that previous scenario, we're looking at 2019, like the child's a senior, 2019-20. So they're going to look at the 2018 data, because that's what's on the FAFSA. They want you to project out the rest of 2019, what's this going to be, and they want you to guesstimate 2020 as well. Okay, and they're going to ask a lot more detailed questions about cars and other property and things that are not included on the FAFSA. They're going to ask about your home equity and things like that that are not included on the FAFSA. So you really can't hide anything, but if you need money and you get accepted, there's money there. Okay. So merit scholarships is where part of this money comes from the colleges, and you need to give them a reason. So you can get one for athletics, academics, things like debate, and other things where they compete. Fine arts, you can get them. Leadership, community service. You can get religious ones from the major or a college. Sometimes the college major department has its own scholarships. The college inside the university will have its own. Depending on your career plans, future whatevers, they will have scholarships for those. And then alumni are going to set up scholarships with all sorts of criteria. I just got a letter from my graduate school alma mater about the scholarship that I endowed, and that's specifically for graduate students, and they've got certain criteria on it at that school because there isn't as much money for graduate students, so that's how I set it up. When I'm going to endow a scholarship, I can set it up all I want. I can, only be my descendants that happens, or people from certain high schools or counties or all kinds of things. So you'll want to explore and see what you qualify for, and make sure if you need to do any additional forms or anything, applications, you do that. And then there are also things that are not specific to you so much. As I mentioned before, scholarships can be used as coupons. And so colleges that are trying to attract more people will use them. Now, our research universities, Tufts and Boston College and Dartmouth and NYU and Notre Dame and Duke and Stanford, they don't really need to. So they don't tend to give much. So this is the percent of students that are receiving something in the general category of merit awards. But it's not necessarily very much money. Like Notre Dame, I think they give $2,000 if you're Catholic. Okay, given their cost, that's not really a whole lot. But that's probably why their number is so high. Okay, so this is percent of students, not dollars. So they're just not very motivated because they don't need to. Okay, and then you have things called master's colleges. So master's colleges only have undergraduate and master's degrees. They don't offer doctorates. These tend to be schools that are smaller, and they tend to be known in their region and not so well elsewhere. And I'm hoping you notice that the dollars in the background are more dark, more available. And you'll see that, like University of Dallas, everybody gets money. Creighton, almost everybody. Drake, almost everybody. St. Catherine's, Regis, Bradley, Pacific, Trinity, Butler. So there are a bunch of them. And you get money because you went there. I have had that happen before with my own children, where I was on a college visit with them, and we hadn't left the admissions office yet. And they already said, well, everybody who comes here gets $10,000 or whatever the amount was. So they are a school that 100% everybody gets some kind of merit award. So their sticker price is just to be competitive with the other schools kind of like them. They're trying to say, you know, we're of this academic caliber. See our price. We're in that ballpark, but they don't really charge that much. So I wanted to let you know about that because that's money from the schools that people don't necessarily think about. Liberal arts colleges are another example of schools that tend to be very generous. They don't tend to be as well known, and they tend to be some of the best places to go, especially if you want to go to graduate school. Smaller classes, better attention, better connections with the professors, phenomenal opportunities at lots of them for research and travel and amazing things in the academic realm that the big schools don't really have for undergraduates because they have such a huge population of graduate students and the professors are busy working on their research and not so focused on undergrads. Liberal arts colleges don't have graduate students. And so you're getting to know the professors and they love teaching as well as their field. So it's a different dynamic. And they tend to be very generous because they're just not known. I mean, how many of you guys knew about the College of Worcester before you read this thing? You know, Kalamazoo College, KZU, some people have heard of, but, you know, Denison, Eckert, Juniata, people haven't heard of these schools. They're great schools. They're generous schools. And they're trying to attract more good students. And this is part of how they're doing it. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, of course, there are colleges that give no merit scholarships, like Harvard and Yale and MIT and Columbia, Stanford. They have applications running miles deep on every desk. They just don't need to give anybody a penny to want to come. However, these schools are also very generous on the need-based side. So that tends to go that way. So those highly selective schools tend to be very generous on the need-based side if you can get in and don't give any merit, which makes sense when you have the kinds of academics and accomplishments happening for kids at this level. How do you differentiate and give merit scholarships? It doesn't make any sense. Getting in is your merit scholarship. So all these things to consider as you are exploring schools and looking at what the realities are on the financial aid side of things. Okay, I mentioned private scholarships before. Like I said, it's a 1 to 1.5% of all aid. They reduce your eligibility for need-based aid dollar for dollar because they're considered a resource. Everyone's going to have a different deadline and different requirements. A lot of them require essays. Some require a project. There's a whole spectrum. There are places where you can spend money on a scholarship search. Do not do that. And there are some websites where you can get information without giving out your email and stuff, and a lot that you cannot. If you go to my website, CelticCollegeConsultants.com, in the resource section of financial frequently asked questions, a few pages down, if you keep scrolling, you'll see that there's a question on scholarships, and I list a number of reputable websites to search for scholarships on. There are some books available. I haven't found them to be terribly helpful, but feel free to try. I've found that the databases online are just better. Okay, another area, not merit-based, is tuition reduction programs. So this is particularly true in public schools. There are a couple privates that participate, which is kind of odd, but as you may know, when you go to a public school in your state, you pay one tuition rate. If you go out of state, you're going to pay the out-of-state tuition rate, which can be double the in-state tuition or more. It's in California, it's more than double. But groups of states have gotten together and created these exchanges or markets. And what they're doing is, for participating schools, and sometimes it's the majors within the school, so you have to really get into the details on these. But if you live in one state, go to a school in another state, in the exchange or the marketplace, the out-of-state school will only charge you 150% of in-state tuition. This saves typically between $5,000 and $10,000 a year. So it's a great deal. Hopefully you've looked at your state and you've noted the name of the one in your area. It's got to do with where you're residents, and it's, as I said, public universities, and you want to do the research to make sure the right colleges and the right majors. So here's a common mistake. I had a student a number of years ago who lived in California, was going to go to a school in Arizona. She was doing a double program, so it was going to be a 5-year program. The out-of-state cost of tuition, the cost of attendance was $39,000. And so at 5 years, it was going to be $195,000 for her degree. And when she gave me her application to review, the way she'd filled it out, she would have paid full rack out of state, full price. And I made a couple of adjustments so that, because they had different versions of the major, it was like they were they were asking the question, are you paying attention to the details? So they had almost identical majors, very similar, some that were in the program and some that were not. So the common name for those majors were not participating in the program. So catching that, correcting her mistakes, then submitting her application, saved $9,000 a year or $46,000 over the 5 years. So significant change, but you got to make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's and get yourself in the right buckets. The information's out there, but you have to make sure that you do it correctly. Some of them you need to apply early because they limit the number as well. That's one of the things to look for. Okay, so I'm hoping you can gather why selecting colleges wisely is a key piece of this. That's where the money comes from. There's so many different aspects to financial aid that really are dependent on the school. So having that in mind is key. And remember, as I said in the beginning, colleges are businesses. There are people on their staffs who are strategic enrollment management officers or vice presidents for enrollment management or something like that is their title. And their purpose in life is to make sure that enough students are attending, that they fill their enrollment needs, and enough of them are paying enough to meet their budgeting needs. And so they're balancing the deep-pocketed families versus the less deep-pocketed families and all those funding sources and all of that. There are advanced degrees in this area, okay? So there are professionals that's all they do all day long is cook the books to make sure that the business side of the college is taken care of and that tuition and fees are coming in and being that revenue source that they need to be. Most families, on the other hand, are approaching this on their own. So I would strongly encourage you, if that's you, to have a consultation with myself, a professional college consultant, and explore your questions and feel me out, explore, ask questions. How could I possibly benefit you? What are your goals? What are your needs? What can I bring to the table that would help you achieve those in ways that you can't do by yourself? And see if that investment, that partnership, how that could best serve your family. There are several ways to work with me. So that's something to think about because they do have people on their side very much so working for them. So just evening the playing field a little bit. Okay, a tool that everybody has that they can use is the net price calculator. It was required by law just a few years ago that all the colleges put this on their website. Some of them, you go to the financial aid page and they're like, hi, come see our net price calculator, see how much it's going to cost to come here. Very helpful. Others, it's in the sub basement locked in a corner and you can't find it except by going in the search bar. So net price calculator is something you want to write in your notes and just put it in the search bar and get it that way. That way you don't have to hunt or get frustrated. But another thing it'll tell you about the school is if you go to the financial aid page and you find that it's hidden, they're probably not so generous. Okay. It's sort of an indication. Another thing to note, some will say only 5 minutes to complete or something. The federal government doesn't require the caliber of the net price calculator. It doesn't have to give you a terribly accurate picture. So there are a number of companies that provide these. And so you will find as you start using them, you may have accounts with them because the College Board has one. There's several people and a bunch of colleges will use those. And so that can be helpful. The rule of thumb that you need to keep in mind, though, is if they only ask a few questions, the ballpark isn't worth much. If they're starting to ask questions like, what's your child's GPA? What are your child's test scores? What does the child want to study? Where are you from? How much money? This, that. Then you're like, aha, this is annoying. You're going to get a very good estimate from that calculator. And it's not a guarantee from the school. Sometimes things change. There's particular details, all of that, but you will get a good ballpark, and that is very helpful to have. It's like looking for houses when you're talking to a realtor and they know, oh, that one's overpriced. It's not going to sell for that. Or that one's underpriced. They're just looking for lots of bids. It's going to sell for more than that. That kind of information. So this detailed net price calculator can be that kind of help. And that's available on every college's website. Okay. Another thing that you need to consider is having a budget. A lot of families are just scared and they're thinking, I got to pay whatever I got to pay. You need to have a budget. What can we afford out of pocket? It really, really helps to know that and to get real about it. Some people say, well, we have $5,000. Like, where are you going to go? That really limits your options. So having a budget, knowing what works, how can we cash flow this? What are the options? And then respecting that budget as you're looking at schools. Because if it's going to be a net cost that's just way too high, that's not a good fit. You can't bankrupt yourself to send your child to college. It just doesn't work. Now, I wanted to touch on last some strategies to lower costs, because there's a lot of factors to consider. First of which is defining your goals. Okay. Good fit is huge. Transferring is very expensive. You need to do your homework when you're looking at schools. Look at the departments, the programs, the campus vibe, the learning styles, the requirements, the options. Your lowest out of pocket is key. You know, it's like buying sardines, but nobody in your house eats sardines. Great, we've got fish. It's got protein in it, but nobody will eat it. It's not a good use of the money, okay? And then brand name schools are not necessarily better. There are, sorry about the typo there are studies showing that the kids who make the most of what's going on their campus, make connections, do long-term projects, work in their field, do internships and that kind of thing, they're the happiest. They get the most out of it. Doesn't matter when they went to school. And this study was done by schools wanting to know that it was making a difference that they went to their schools so they could use that as a marketing thing. It turned out to not be the case. Okay, so you want to look at life on campus and in class, your desired majors, programs, professors. You know, what do they rate my professor? What are they saying? Oh, they're all unavailable. They're nasty. You start seeing that, you know, class after class after professor across the university. That's not an academic climate that's very friendly to undergrads, probably. Programs like BS, MS, kind of, you know, 5-year master's degree programs, that kind of thing. Study abroad, experiential, hands-on learning, all kinds of different opportunities there. Cooperative education and internships, working in your field as a student, on campus or off campus, for a semester, for a summer, really makes a difference as you feel out the career options in your field and explore all of that. And it changes your learning because now you're understanding how that learning is being applied in the field. Post-grad placement and salaries. As you're looking at schools, ask them. Go to the career placement office and, you know, how's it working for you? I had, you know, my students looking at this major, that major. How are those students getting placed? Where are they working? What kinds of salaries do they start? They should have that information without violating anybody's confidentiality. And if they don't, and they don't have a lot of support, or, yeah, we'll help you with a resume, and we'll tell you how to wear for your interview, yeah, it's not enough, right? Graduation rates are key. The average in the US is 6 years, not 4. So you need to be aware because we are social beings and we are influenced by our peers, and we're also influenced by the institutions we're part of. And so if the gears are grinding in a rhythm that's a 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 year rhythm, it's harder to get out in 4. If the gears are grinding in a way and everything's smooth to get out in 4, we're more likely to do so. Scholarship opportunities, we mentioned that. Percent need met, we've discussed that in tuition reduction programs. So make sure you're bringing everything together. You want to start your career major search in high school. There's a lot that we already know. We know if we're good at math or not. We know what our personality is like. We're a people person or we're not. Or there's a lot that we could know. And frankly, students just don't have anybody helping with them with this, and they don't know what to do. And they, you know, they may say, well, I like this and these things are important to me and I'm good at these things, but who would hire me to do that? What kind of work would that be? And they don't know. You know, they know what mom does, dad does, you know, their aunts, uncles, grandparents, friends around, and the big name things, you know, doctor, lawyer, but they don't really know what they do. But, you know, there's a million things they could be doing. So helping them have that search so they can know what classes to take, especially math as you get into the upper math, what direction we were going in there, science, how much and which directions, and all of that, and what careers, therefore what majors, therefore what kind of a program do I want to be in that works for me, as well as the kind of field I want to get into, and who's recruiting on the campuses, all of that. When we start that in high school, we can change our major over and over and over and explore different things and find dead ends, and we haven't lost a penny. You know, we're not changing our major and transferring colleges halfway through and all the rest of it. So define your goals. Good fit is key. Know your budget. Make sure you know your scholarship options. Watch the percent of need met. Watch the graduation rates. Many are going to surprise you at how low they are. Okay? Because this is what we're thinking. Lots of money for 4 years. We'll get through this. This is the average. 6 years. Unfortunately, 7 and 8 years and 9 and 10 years happen. This is avoidable. By and large, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, that is all avoidable. And it's a lot of money. It's added cost. It's added time. It's lost wages because they could have been done already. So the planning ahead in high school makes a big difference. Looking at the graduation rates of the colleges makes a big difference. I got to tell you, when I'm putting together college lists, I discriminate heavily against schools with low graduation rates because that's just showing me the infrastructure's not there and the peers are not moving through. And it's not a good place for most students to be. You can also lower costs ahead of time. Dual enrollment, AP exams, DSST exams, CLEP exams. Homeschoolers have a lot of opportunities to save. We'd love to talk with you about the ones that work for you personally and your family and your dynamic. I've given other talks on this whole topic, so I'm just mentioning it because it's important as we're looking at financial aid. There's a lot of things we can do to help ourselves. I invite you to schedule a consultation with me. Go to CelticCollegeConsultants.fullslate.com. Click on my name, Katherine O'Brien, and you'll be able to click on initial consultations and see when I'm available and schedule something. And then I also have some gifts for you. Oh, during that consultation, I have a survey I'll send ahead to the students so I can get ready. I'll give you an agenda, what we're going to discuss. And basically, we're going to spend an hour going through your family situation, answering your questions, exploring whatever side of it is. If it's academic prep, course selection, do we want to continue homeschooling, the financial sides of things, the certain colleges we're looking at or majors, whatever it is. We'll look at that, and then what I can bring to the table we'll also discuss. And the tools and whatever. I am by no means a big salesman. So however I can serve you, I will help you and give you the tools that I can give you. Okay, then a couple gifts for you, or at least one gift. I created a college selection comparison tool as a Google Sheet. So it's a spreadsheet in Google Docs. If you go to tinyurl.com/perfectcollegelist, you'll be able to access that, then make a copy over into your own Google Sheets, and you can use that spreadsheet. I think you can pull it out to Excel too, if that's what you prefer, to do your searching, to organize your search. Oops. So thank you very much for coming. Oops, sorry. And my name is Katherine O'Brien, CelticCollegeConsultants.com. Again, that website for the spreadsheet is tinyurl.com/perfectcollegelist. If you'd like to explore having a consultation and having a private meeting with your family and me, that is CelticCollegeConsultants.fullslate.com. If you'd like to learn more about me and see other videos I have on my website, read my blog, explore my services, all of that, it's CelticCollegeConsultants.com. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.